What actually causes inflation? I know people talk about it all the time and they're like, oh, well, the rising prices of things mean that we need to be paid more, so and that things cost more to produce, and so that you have to increase minimum wages, and that happens from the government level, and so it's minimum wages that increases the price of things. They're causally connected. That's what inflation is. And I'm like, that doesn't quite add up though. It's what, from the research that I've done, that's everyone's answer online as to what actually causes inflation. And it just doesn't really make any sense to me. Because if you had a fixed amount of money in the world, let's say there was £1 million in England, whatever, the price of goods couldn't go up because no one had any more stuff. No one had any more money to pay for it. So it just couldn't go up if the amount of money stays fixed, unless the value of that item has increased to the person purchasing it. So we have prices for things based on how much people are actually willing to spend on it, relative to how much money they have and earn. That's kind of the basic economics of supply and demand, right? And value. But knowing this, why don't prices stabilize? And I think I've come to the answer. COVID provided a really clear image of this, because I think it was the US government printed something like $30 trillion. Don't quote me on that number, but I think it was the equivalent of $80,000 per person in the States, was how much extra money they printed. Now, with that extra money in circulation, nothing else has changed, just the total amount of money has now increased. And theoretically, it should be spread evenly. It won't be, that's not how economics works, but there is more money in supply, so now money is worth less. Like, as a percentage of the total money there is, the price of things will stay relative. For example, if a loaf of bread was 0.0000001% of all the money in the world, all the money in your country, that will remain true no matter how much money there is. And so that's a very clear example that when governments print money, that forces inflation, right? And so I was thinking about this, and I've had this issue for a really long time, of how do governments build so many things? Like, we have a friend here who's working in Australia. She's part of a team building a single pedestrian footbridge. The price of that footbridge is $500 million. $500 million to build a freaking footbridge for like 1,000 people. Why is the government spending money on that? Now, living here in Australia, especially in Melbourne, there are so many things that are architecturally beautiful, that they've built things that are not just for their utility. And I'm there like, wow, that would cost so much extra to make it beautiful, but I enjoy it every day. So I'm kind of a hypocrite when I say that. But that money has to come from somewhere. And then to know that governments are notoriously inefficient with their money. Typically, my experience having seen government-run businesses, arms, I don't know what to call them, services, they're run so poorly because it's not about profit. It's not about making the best business possible where you give the people the most value for the money that you have that they would be willing to spend. Because if you can give someone twice the value, you can charge twice the amount and people will want to buy it and you might make more money. So that's a win for you and a win for them. And then if you can scale up to massive proportions like Amazon, you can give away things that are ridiculous, that no other company could ever do, like free postage, which is insane, for like 50 quid a year. That's ridiculous. And it only works when everyone does it. So you get those wild economies of scale. But the government doesn't work like that. It doesn't have those incentives built in of capitalism. And so it just wastes money left, right, and centre. Like, there are people's jobs that just are not needed to be done. There are so many levels of bureaucracy. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that. But when I believe deep in my bones, it is run so inefficiently. They waste so much money. They don't collect as much tax because they're always talking about it. Where does the money come from? And that leads me to believe that they are just printing money for social infrastructure. And that's why inflation works every year. Now, people are going to say, no, inflation is due to like banks loaning money. And the moment they have your money, they now have to pay for it, and then they need to charge it out, and that causes interest rate changes, which bases on inflation rates. And I'm like, oh yeah, but these are all causally linked, but they're not dictating the inflation price. Like, as I said, if nothing was made, if there was no extra money in the system, inflation just couldn't happen from my limited understanding of macroeconomics. Because I never took it, I've just done a little bit of research, and this is where I've come to. I honestly think the government throwing money away on things that we don't need, being inefficient. Now I want to just go back to the idea of the overspending for beauty. I actually think that is really worth it. And I think for inflation alone having that impact of a beautiful society, helping people and all that sort of stuff, I actually think is worth inflation. But the inefficiency of a government-based system like that, where they just print money to solve their problems, feels so painful when we spend so long trying to make money and then they just take it from us. But that's what I think causes inflation. I think governments just print money as and when they want it. And then the rest of the people have to deal with it. And then they come and take more from us to pay for it. Tough system. But I am pro for governments. I am pro for tax. I am, I think it's the best system that we got. I'm not saying it's the best system that exists, but I think it's the best one we got. And there's just no better alternative. There you go. That's a deep one for today. What actually causes inflation? It ain't these guys. Cuties. Peace.